Hello, my friends. I wanted to make a comment on self-inquiry and spiritual practice altogether, and its relationship to awakening or enlightenment. Um, in my own journey, self-inquiry took hold of my being in a spontaneous emergence of an intense self-inquiry process that principally took the form of the thought or the inquiry. What is this thing called me? It occurred. The thought came to my mind. I want enlightenment. I want a better relationship. I want to be a success in life. I want to grow spiritually. But how can I know if I even need enlightenment if I don't know the nature of the I that needs or wants, right? And this spontaneous self-inquiry process, the mind or attention really inverted itself in it, looking at what is the source of attention, and it was a contracted feeling in the chest, and that was the me sense. What is this thing called me, right? And I wanted to just know what was at the core of this me sense, and I didn't care whether it was what it was. I had no vested interest in the substratum of the me or the essence of the me being universal consciousness. It just turned out that it is universal consciousness. But I just wanted to get to the core of the I am, or the sense, the actual visceral living, sense of the I am, the vibrational field of presence that we are. We need to investigate it. So this all happened as well in the context of I met this Siddha Guru, a great Siddha, who by mere eye contact with him, there was an explosion of divine energy, divine love and oneness. That was then a few days later, this spontaneous self-inquiry happened that led to a Satori and the revelation of what is. The revelation of the absolute, and that came with a profound Kundalini awakening, and that whole process, continues to deepen and unfold. Now, I just read something, a quote about self-inquiry, and in the quote kind of stated that self-inquiry was about the silence after the question, and then the silence would reveal the self. And that's all good and well. I think any teacher can share, or any individual can share what their own process was, how things unfolded in your case. But there's no way that it is my point here. There's no set pattern to the way spiritual growth and enlightenment happen. So like, for example, I was at a retreat once. I was helping to run an Enlightenment Intensive, which is a self-inquiry combined with communication process, enlightenment dyads, in a residential retreat. And there was a young man on the retreat who decided that rather than work on who am I, he'd work on what is another. And just suddenly, in the midst of him working on this what is another, he had this enormous explosion of consciousness, and a titanic awakening, a really powerful awakening. Let's take Ramana Maharshi, who we could say is the father in the modern era of the self-inquiry method. He's certainly the source of the popularity of self-inquiry. And Ramana, one of his relatives died. And the shock of the news of the death of his relative caused him to turn inward in an inquiry that was sparked by the concept of death and the reality of his uncle's death. And he lay down, you see. Ramana's method that he taught was one thing, but the method that happened in his life was another. They were the same method, but the manifestation of them, this is my point, you see, the nuances of the process vary. So Ramana lay down and he imitated the body with rigor mortis, and he imagined the life force is leaving my body. Now the body's lifeless. Well, what remains? Well, the mind remains. Well, okay, if the mind was gone, what would remain? And there's the sense of I. He kind of stripped everything back in I would say, a deeply felt, imaginative process. You know, by combining his imagination with his discrimination in a movement of attention towards the center of being, to what, and his question was, his question was, what is death? And then, okay, what dies, you see? To ask what is death, you have to ask what is life. And then the sense of I, okay, imagine the mind is gone, the body's gone, but I still feel the full force of the I. This was the process. This was the living process inside Ramana. And then now he's looking at the I sense, the attention's turning back onto its source because the I is universal, but Ramana didn't know this. He didn't have these concepts. He's just looking at that. He said, I still feel the full force of the I. And then he said, in that moment, his attention was sucked into the infinitude of the universal self. You see? So, my point is, there's no particular way, if you read something or you hear something from a teacher about the way their process manifested, you might try to imitate that, or you can take it on as a kind of practice, and that may be in the moment that you do that with all your heart. It may be that grace rises up to meet you and Kensho, Satori, union, divine revelation or enlightenment happens by grace, and I emphasize, when you do the self-inquiry, however it happens, with all your heart. Remember, if you're familiar with Nisargadatta Maharaj, he had a saying, earnestness is everything. And he would say, everything yields to earnestness. Awakening happens when the moment is ripe, and there's no particular way that the process unfolds. There's no standard. There are commonalities within the process, but you need to engage your living process spontaneously and authentically in the moment by moment. If you do it with heart, you can't get it wrong. And that is what I wanted to say. Om Namah Shivaya. Thank you.